All right, this is the demographic review, page 2. Let's talk about the settlement patterns and population patterns of each of the English colonial regions then. So New England, how did New Englanders come over here? Families or individuals? Yes, they came as families. What can you tell me about their communities?
They were organized?
Yes, they were much more organized into small communities. Usually the center of the community was the church. They tried to set up some primary schooling. What about their lifespan in New England? It was higher because they didn't have as much disease. And so you had multi-generational families where you actually had grandparents and parents and children. Okay? In the middle colonies, how did they mainly settle? They settle in urban areas, on farms, spread out, on plantations. How they settle? Anybody?
Farms.
Yeah, a lot of small farms, but they also had some of the biggest cities, Philadelphia and New York. Most of them came as families, and again, they are the most ethnically diverse. And originally, New York was a Dutch colony until England pretty much just took it over in 1665. Delaware was heavily settled by the Swedes. You had Germans, Scots-Irish, English, and Pennsylvania, so it's very diverse. All right, the Chesapeake. What are some things you can tell me about their population, lifespan, how they came over?
Pretty much all indentured servants.
Yeah, 75% of the people who came to the Chesapeake were indentured servants. So are they coming over as families or individuals? They're coming over as individuals. Yes, there was a shortage of women. It was mainly men. Yeah, high death rates because of all the disease in the swampy areas that they settled in. Are they settling in towns or spread out? They're spread out on plantations. And something you might want to note, even though the initial colonists that came over were indentured servants, by 1750, half of Virginia's population was slave. And they also had, in New England, they might have had a lot of religious conflict, but in the Chesapeake, they had a lot of class conflict between those wealthy FFVs, First Families of Virginia, who control most of the land, and the former indentured servants, which leads to Bacon's Rebellion, because those people feel like they're not, the government in the House of Burgesses is not protecting them. All right, and then the Southern, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. How are they settling mainly? Large plantations. You don't see indentured servants here because pretty much by the time those colonies are settled, the transition from indentured servants to slaves has already occurred. And so by 1750, 2/3 of South Carolina's population was slave. So by 1750, 2/3 of South Carolina's population was slave. And disease, again, will be a little bit more rampant here. Also, I would note, North Carolina tended to not be as all big plantations. They did have some small farms and things like that because part of North Carolina is very mountainous. All right, that should be pretty familiar material to you because remember that first big essay we spent a lot of time on. You did it all about these kind of things, okay? All right, let's get into the Jacksonian era and the first industrial era. So we're talking here about 1820 to 1840, even though Jackson was only president from 1828 to 1836. This is when we have our first wave of immigrants come over, okay? And they're primarily Germans and Irish, okay? So what are some characteristics of the German immigrants who arrived here? Mm-hmm.
They had more money.
Yes, they had more money, so where did they tend to settle? The Northwest Territory, okay? They didn't stay right in the urban areas where they arrived. They had money to come further inland. Other characteristics about the German immigrants?
They were skilled.
Huh? Yeah, they tend to have more skilled labor. They were farmers, and farming is going to be the main thing they do. They tend to have higher education. What about religion? Any ideas? They'll be primarily Protestant, but also Catholic, but more Protestant than Catholic. And they will play a big part of the reform movements that we see during this era. They will be leading abolitionists. They'll be pushing for better education, things like that. They won't really be big advocates of temperance, though. All right, now the Irish. What are some characteristics about the Irish that came during this time period? Caleb?
They were poor.
Yes, they're more poor, so when they get off the boat, they stay right in the cities. They tend not to come further inland, so they're mainly in the northeast. What do they do for jobs? Yeah, they start to work in the factories that are springing up during the first industrial era. They're not as skilled, they're not as educated, and they're mostly Catholic. Now, they will become active parts of the Democratic Party and really form a lot of the political machines in the Democratic Party in the Northeast that we see. Which are discriminated against more? The Irish, okay, because they are more poor, they're taking jobs, they are Catholic, all that plays into why they face more discrimination, but they're both going to face discrimination. And what are some of the first ways that we begin to organize our discrimination against immigrants at this time? Anybody remember the political party that springs up and is anti-immigrant? Okay, the Nativists is the name we give to people who are anti-immigrant, so I know that term. And anybody know the political party? The Know Nothing Party was kind of like the slang term for it. The American Party was the official name, but the Know Nothing Party, okay? Also during this time, we do have a major migration of people occurring, and that is because of the Indian Removal Act in 1832. And it's important to note that Indian Removal Act did not just impact the Cherokee. It impacted all the native tribes that were left east of the Mississippi River, and all of them had to move west of the Mississippi River. So the Creek, the Seminoles, there are all kinds of groups. And the Cherokee is just the one we know because they went through the court system to try to fight it. But other Native Americans will resist by fighting, okay? And again, Jackson feels like he's doing this because it's in the Native Americans' best interest. It's going to protect them if we move them west of the Mississippi. The Cherokee, again, we know were more like white Americans. They lived in towns, they had newspapers, they had their own alphabet, they farmed, they dressed like white people. And so they challenged this in the case Worcester versus Georgia. And what did the Supreme Court decide? They cannot be forced out, that they should have their land, even though Georgia was trying to take it. And what did Jackson do? He completely disregarded it and ordered Indian removal anyways, which was unconstitutional. It was a threat to the checks and balances. And after he's out of office is actually when the Trail of Tears happens. It happens when Van Buren is president. And that's when the Cherokees were forced on the march to Oklahoma. 3,000 of them will die. All right around the same time period then, towards the end of industrialization, we see the beginnings of this idea of manifest destiny in the 1840s. And this is going to cause another migration in our country. What is manifest destiny? Matt?
It is our belief that expansion of the U.S.
Oh, you hear me what you wrote?
Must expand to the west coast.
Okay, yes, it is our God-given right to expand across the continent and bring democracy, our education, our civilization, spread it across the continent. It's our manifest destiny to do that. And that, of course, is going to be one of the causes behind Western expansion. What are the other causes? What else causes us to go west in the 1840s? Yep.
The Louisiana Purchase.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we had purchased this Louisiana Territory back in 1803, and that's actually the territory we settle last after the Civil War. We bypassed the whole Louisiana Purchase, and we head for California and Oregon. Why? The gold rush, okay? So we have the gold rush in 1848, 1849. Why else do we spread west?
The nationalism after the war.
Very good. Yeah, the spirit of nationalism after the War of 1812 makes us want to go west.
Some people were gaining like religious freedom.
Okay, yeah, the Mormons moved west for religious freedom, and they actually kind of blazed a trail for everybody else. So we have trails developed to move people west. Okay, the Santa Fe Trail, the Oregon Trail. And for the South, why was the South interested in Western expansion? Expansion of slavery as well was a cause. All right, now, what are the effects of Western expansion at this time? Done?
The Mexican War.
Yeah, we go to war because we want that territory where so many Americans are living. So war with Mexico, the annexation of Texas comes about as a result of this desire to grow, manifest destiny. Mexican War, what does that lead to in our country? Yeah, ultimately it'll lead to the Civil War because it increases the sectional tension, right, between the North and the South. Because as we expand west and then we reach population for somewhere to become a state, the question becomes, is it slave or free? Also, the conflict with Native Americans that we see after the Civil War. Its roots are right here as we start expanding west. Okay,